one day I'm going to stand up here with Nick's baton.
Yeah.
And it's going to be a very different experience for all of us. So we're doing it a little bit differently today because we're going to talk about experiencing the sacred. I'm so sorry. And then what we're going to do is we're going to have a discussion about it. Because, you know, we're a small group, and I always find that the wisdom is in the room. So what we're going to do is I'm going to say a few words about how we experience the sacred, how other faith traditions sometimes have given us wisdom on experiencing the sacred, and then I want to talk about it because there's so much experience and there's so much richness right out there. And I find when we have our discussions, we learn so much by saying and by hearing what is on the hearts of each of us. So let's just talk a little bit about how we experience the sacred and why it matters. And the reason I'm doing this in the beginning of the year is because this really is what we are about. I mean, communities can meet for a lot of different reasons. We sometimes have folks come in here who are for self-help or just inspirational, but for me, what matters and what I think in part it is my job to do is to give us the tools so that we can find the sacred in our own lives, so we can experience the holy in our own lives, because I think that's what we're trying to do. I think each of us is just trying to walk home because we know that is home. We know in our heart when we are connecting with the divine, we are at home. And that gives us peace, it gives us balance, it helps us show up in the world as who we are. And so that's one thing I value about One World, is that remains our focus. How do we do that in the hurly-burly and the hustle-bustle of life? Those things go together, hurly-burly and hustle-bustle. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about that for a second. So scholar Mircea Eliade is a Romanian scholar, and he wrote that the heart of religious experience is our human awareness of the sacred. Think about it. We have all these religions that are built up and they've got rituals and fancy clothing and lights and bells and all this stuff. And at the very beginning of that was somebody's experience of the holy, right? Somebody's direct connection with the holy. And then they went and tried to tell it to someone else. And they said, I think I know what you're saying. Let me put all these rituals in place so that I can help others experience the holy. And what sometimes happened is they got away from the holy and they got into the ritual. So what we are about here is getting back to that experience, that direct experience of the holy. As William James said in his Varieties of Religious Experience, he said, knowledge of a thing is not the thing itself. So I can stand up here and teach you all about theology and all about it. It doesn't matter, because knowledge of the thing is not the thing itself. What we're looking for here is the thing itself. That is what spirituality is for us. Whenever we perceive that the sacred is present, or the sacred was present at some point, how we regard that thing changes. We look at it qualitatively differently. It's the same quality that theologian Rudolf Otto called the numinous. The numinous, the non-rational awareness of the holy, the non-rational awareness of the other. So how do we as humans in this human life go about doing this? Well, we make distinctions between what is sacred and what is profane. Okay, I'm not using profane in terms of dirty words. What is sacred? Yeah, really. What is sacred and what is mundane? So how do we make those distinctions? Okay, let's think of things like days. We all have days that are special to us. My birthday is special to me. Being an attorney, the day I passed the bar is special to me. Talk about sacred days. Well, not really. But, you know, the day your first child was born, whatever. We can all think of days that are special. But they are special to us. They are not holy days. The same is true with places. I can think of the place I got married, the place I sat on the beach with my son at sunrise and watched the sun come up. Those are special places, but they're not necessarily holy places. Well, the last one might have been. But places that are special to us, where we had that great vacation. Similarly, we have items that we treasure. A family heirloom, something somebody gave us. Pictures our kids drew, but they're not necessarily holy. So what makes the difference? What makes the difference? Items that are holy, and we're going to talk about this later, but I suggest that items that are holy point to something other than themselves. They point to a realm, to an other than just themselves. That's the difference between what we regard as holy and what is beloved, but what is just more mundane. It is our perception of the sacred around us. And this is one thing I want to cultivate this year. How we perceive, how we live, it's our perception of what is around us, of the sacred around us, of our ability to understand the sacred around us. That reminds us, as Karen Armstrong said, that we are surrounded by the unseen. Think about that. Isn't that a wonderful image as we go through our lives, that we are surrounded by the unseen? So what we are looking for is doorways that lead us from our everyday experience into what is holy. So what are some of these doorways or triggers or moments that others have found to be useful in the past? And how do we create our own? How do we pass through them? And how do we move into that perception that all of life is holy, that we are surrounded by the unseen, that this moment can be a holy moment? The more we do that, the more frequently we do that, we walk that path. The path becomes more well-defined, and it becomes easier to do it. It's all about awareness, which is what I've said before. It's all about intention and focus and awareness. So, why is this important? Well, because it reminds us that we are not just physical beings having occasional sacred moments. We are spiritual beings growing through this life here now. What is it Harmony Nuance said? We are spiritual beings having a human experience. And we need to remind ourselves of that, because there is so much in life that tries to dissuade us from that, that tries to bring us away from that. The stuff, the rushing, the work, all the things that we zoom through our days, and it's 9 o'clock at night and we say, what have I done? Where was I? Or as I drive from point A to point B, and I don't even remember the drive because there's so much on my mind. We need to give ourselves the tools, the ability to make those moments known to us, to remind us that our life is a holy experience. Not so that we can find God out there waiting for a message from God or a sign from God, but so that we can realize that the divine is in here, and that we can maintain that connection with the divine in every moment of our day, if such is possible. It keeps us connected to that center in our hearts, in our being, that never breaks, that is never empty, but of which we are so often unaware. But that's the greatest gift we have. We carry it with us always. We just don't know it. So what we do here is we just try to find ways to help us remember. So Eliade taught that there are 2 ways, and again, these are just tools you can think about. There are generally 2 ways that we experience the sacred. He calls them hierophanies and theophanies. Okay, for the academics in the group, that was it. Okay. A hierophany is an experience of the holy. A theophany is an experience of God. Right? You know that. Okay, cool. A hierophany, experiencing the holy. A theophany is experiencing God. And we've all heard about examples. Okay, in the Christian tradition. Let's think about St. Paul, before he was St. Paul, on the road to Damascus, right? And what happens? God comes down and talks to him. He's struck down. He's blinded. His life is completely changed. That is what one might say in mythology was an experience of God. Blam! Right there. We think of the Prophet Muhammad on Mount Hira during the night of power. He's just praying. He had this habit of going up, and he's praying. All of a sudden, the angel Gabriel is there and tells him 3 times to recite, or Iqra. And the result is the Holy Quran for the next 23 years. That is a direct experience of God. In the Jewish tradition, we think of Moses approaching the burning bush. Take off your sandals, where you stand is holy ground. Those are all myths. Did they actually happen? I don't know. But what are they for? They tell us that as humans, we can have these direct connections with God. We can have these moments when our lives are changed. Moments that invite us into a new future, into a new calling. And that is a wonderful thing. If we just have the courage to do it, if we have the courage to listen and to say, yes, that is my path. Okay, those were theophanies. What about experiences of the holy? Okay, let's think about nature. Eliade suggests that all of nature is a hierophany. Why? Because we can go out and we can see a beautiful garden. We can see a starry night. We can just experience the presence of the divine in all of nature. He says that all of creation is a theophany. If you look at indigenous traditions, if you look at native traditions, you're going to see that a stone is sacred, that a tree is sacred, that a river is sacred. And it's not that you worship that tree or that river or that stone, it's that you worship the divine essence that is present in it and that is present in you and that connects you to it back and forth. If you look at some of these native cultures, some of these indigenous faith traditions, you see that they live in a space of sacrality or sacredness. Everything about their world teaches them something about the divine. Everything connects them to the divine. The Australian Aborigines, in their faith tradition, they have a concept called the dreaming, which was actually coined by a Britisher. But anyway, that's what they call it, is the dreaming. And what it is time away from time. That there was a time when beings came down and created the earth and created the animals and created all of nature, and they're still there. The concept of linear time is gone because that ageless time is still there. And we live in that moment. The greater reality is to live connected to that timeless truth. What is illusion is what we in the West so often call reality. Our troubles, our egos, the things that get in our way. That is illusion in the dreaming. What is true is that ancient truth that created all of us and that continues to create all of us. These awarenesses, these doorways, if you will, can lead us into our connection with the sacred. And one of the things that I want us to do over the coming year is figure out for ourselves what those doorways are. They say that a spiritual community or a spiritual director, the best thing you can do is help each other come to the holy and then get out of the way. Because we each have our own perception of this. We each have our own path toward this. So I'm going to talk about some categories of the sacred that some faith traditions have found to be useful ways to think about this in the past. One is sacred time. What Eliade does is he comes up with 4 categories, just in case you're interested. Sacred time, sacred place, sacred people, and sacred objects is the way he thinks about it. So let's talk about sacred time. Again, it's time out of time. It's those moments where we drop linear time and we enter into ageless time. The dreaming is one example. Another example is if you belong to a particular faith tradition, it's when you have those moments during the year when you reenact rituals or events that have happened before. What's an example? Let's think of Passover in the Jewish tradition. Passover celebrates the escape of the Hebrews from Egypt when the angel of death passed all through Egypt but passed over all the Jewish households and killed the firstborn of all the Egyptians. The Jews fled and Moses led them to the promised land. Okay. What happens every year in Passover? Does somebody just tell that story? It was so great, this happened and this happened. No. What happens is you reenact it. The youngest at the Passover Seder, the youngest child at the table says, he asked the 4 questions. Why is this night like no other night? Why every week do we eat sweet herbs and on this night we eat bitter herbs? Because they are reenacting it. They are making it live again. They are walking out of linear time. And they are entering that ageless time when they themselves are fleeing the Egyptians. They themselves are entering the deserts. They themselves are crossing the Red Sea, not knowing if they will make it or not. It is through these rituals, if you belong to that faith tradition, where you enter that time and you enter those moments of sacred time. For Muslims, you're going to have Ramadan, which is that month of fasting and reflection and prayer. And what do Muslims do during the month of Ramadan? They step back, right? They take it as a time to pray, to think. They walk out of their everyday lives. Fasting reminds them to do that. This is a different time. This is a different period. And because of this time, I am different. And this teaches me that I should always be different, that my life is better when I remember that I am more than just an engineer. I am more than a lawyer. I am more than this. I am more than that. I am timeless. And these rituals help us to do it. Sacred time, time out of time, helps us do that. For those who don't have a discrete faith tradition that we follow, like those of us here, we are an interspiritual community. So what does that mean for us? How do we take advantage of sacred time? Well, we create rituals of our own. With intentionality, we step aside. We just did it in the last few weeks with our burning bowl and our white stone. We do that as a community. We come here and we say, this is a different moment. We are stepping into, right here and right now, the universal oneness that joins us. We are making this time sacred. In our individual practice, what do? We may have Sabbath moments, which I know is a Christian term, but it's a great concept. Time away, time apart, where we pray, where we reflect, where we just go apart and renew ourselves. We come up with our own strategies to create that sacred time. I'm not going to talk so much about sacred people, even though different faith traditions obviously do have sacred people that they regard not as qualitatively different from them, not as more divine than them, but people who are more advanced on the spiritual path. Sages, the Buddha, Jesus the way shower, or Muhammad, who was the prophet of God. These people can lead you by studying their lives, by studying their messages, can lead you to a deeper understanding of your own spiritual awakening. Sacred place is another way we do it. For the Abrahamic tradition, sacred place is going to be, for all three of them, it's going to be Jerusalem. Why? Because they each had something particular that happened there. Jesus walked there. Isaac walked there. Abraham walked there. Muhammad walked there. Muhammad went up to heaven from there. It is sacred to all three. So that place is different for them qualitatively. Dr. Charles Kimball puts it this way. He says, for Muslims, Mecca is not the same as Milwaukee. It means more. It is a different place qualitatively. By being in these locations, we form a connection with the divine that we don't necessarily have in other locations. And the thing that's amazing is our own intention and our own actions can make these things happen, can make every moment holy. And that's one of the awarenesses we build. I mentioned earlier being on a beach with my son, not Nick, my other son, Evan, at sunrise. We were on a beach vacation, and I decided it would be way cool to bring him down to the beach. He did not decide this, by the way. To bring him down to the beach at sunrise and watch the sunrise. I thought, what a great experience. I remember that as a wonderful experience. I have no collection, I have no idea how he remembers it, but it meant a lot to me. It was a holy moment for me, just the two of us sitting on a beach watching the sunrise. It might have been an otherwise very pedestrian thing, but my intention and my hope and my love made that a holy moment for me that I will always remember. So we can do that for ourselves. So what I'd like to do is share your thoughts about what are some of the ways that you here enter into the holy. Do you remember them? Have you forgotten them? One of the benefits for being in an interspiritual community is that we have so many tools to draw from. I grew up as an Episcopalian, as I've shared before. And so I do not go to an Episcopalian church. I left that faith tradition a while back, but on many days I still read the daily office. I still follow the lectionary, and I read the Psalms and I read the prayers. Why? Because it's a tool that works for me. If I were Muslim, I would pray 5 times a day. We are each able to pull what works for us. And that, for me, is an opportunity to touch the holy in my little office, looking at my little altar early in the morning. That's what I do. Because it raises in me the memory of who I am. And as I start my day, it connects me with a power at my center upon which I can draw to get me through the day. I set my intention. and it just works for me as the day starts. So what are some of the other practices? One of the things I just want to mention, I'm going to talk about this more when we talk about our segment on mindfulness. The Buddhists have a practice, it's called Gatha practice. Actually, it started with the Zoroastrians, but it was made more popular by Thich Nhat Hanh. And it's popular now. But Gatha practice it's G-A-T-H-A, and what it does is when you start any mundane activity, what you do is you dedicate it. You reflect in your mind the energy with which you want to approach that task. There's an author named Zekiah Murray. He gives us a good example. He gives the example of walking into your garden. Okay, I'm walking into my garden. I can do it that way, or I can walk into my garden and I can repeat to myself, I am entering my garden. I see my true nature. In its reflection, my heart is at peace. As you eat, as you look at your plate, you can say, I dedicate this meal to the well-being of all. May all have enough food to eat. May this food lead me to be more skillful and more compassionate. You can say anything, but what it does is it raises an awareness in your mind that you have the ability to dedicate your energy to making anything you do a holy moment, to making anything you do an opportunity for growth and connection and unfolding. These are gifts that we share and that we can do. So one thing, I'm going to stop talking, and really, everyone goes, there's a gift. Yeah. So what are some of the, let's just talk. I have a mic here someplace. What are some of the gifts, what are some of the doorways that you have used or that you plan to use in this coming year as you try to approach the holy and experience the sacred in your own incredibly busy lives? Because I know we're all busy, but we all have a way to do it. So what are some thoughts? Judy.
There's absolutely nothing in my life that connects me to the sacred, that brings in the divine, than coming here on Sunday mornings. To me, it's sacred time. It's a time out of my week that helps me set the intention for the rest of my week, or it helps me put aside things that maybe weren't working in last week. And the people that I meet here so inspire me. This morning I saw your son Nick walk up to our newcomer this morning and without hesitation introduced himself and gave him a hug. And it reminded me that we get so hung up in the trappings of our everyday lives. Nick doesn't have that. Nick is pure spirit, and what a joy to be in his presence. And then I watched Megan, our dear sweet Megan that we're watching grow up here, take 2 newcomer children under her wing, and they walked out of here today hand in hand, and it just brought me such joy to see that. So this is where I connect. There are other things in my life too, but this is the primary one. This hour, 2 hours I spend here. Thank you all for making that happen for me.
What other one? Oh, sorry. Okay.
Behind my office is a network of paths that are paved, and it gives me an opportunity to take time out from this very stressful job to reconnect with Mother Earth. And on the path, I just take time to hear the birds, smell the trees, see the different colors. I mean, it's winter, things look different now. Take that in. I see wild animals, like deers and various other wild animals occasionally, so I feel very blessed. There's a lot of tree fairies out there, so I love seeing the tree fairies. They're always there to greet me, and that's my sacred place and sacred time, and it really helps me get through the day and stay connected to God and to the universe.
Yeah. Don't you feel just qualitatively different when you do that?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I don't think I could have stayed in this job if they didn't have a network of paths, and I chose to do what I did, to utilize the paths.
Well, and you know what else that tells me is we each have kind of a calling for what speaks to us. You know, I mean, you were drawn to those paths, and you were drawn to that natural setting, and that's where you find it. We each have something, and for others it's something else. but we each have something that will bring that up for us, that will lead us home the way that does. So somebody else had their hands up.
One of the things, I kind of think there was a show on Sci-Fi called Warehouse 13 where the objects got imbued with such emotion they did wonky things. It wasn't necessarily good mojo, but I think about that with like holy objects, that perhaps that they become holy objects because they're so infused with such emotion that they take on kind of a separate aura unto themselves, so to speak. One of the places we go, the Natural Bridge, you know, we've gone with my family. My grandparents went there, and we've met my family many years over there. And they do this very loud, they call it the drama of creation. It's just lights and music and, you know, but it's very powerful. And one time I was with my dad and we were the Hale-Bopp, the comet, watching the bridge, right smack dab in the middle of the bridge, like under, and I remember him saying like, "Oh wow, this is a natural wonder in a natural wonder," and it was, But I mean, that always stayed with me. So, yeah, it's good.
That is a holy moment. Yeah. No, you're right.
Yeah.
No, you're right. And a lot of times sacred objects, you know, that's one of the categories he talks about. I mean, think of things like, okay, your white stone. If you're carrying it around, you imbue that with your heart. Your energy makes that a sacred object to you, right? I mean, on my altar at home, I have the most random assortment of stuff that just is sacred to me because it just means something to me, and that's why it's there. So that rock is not sacred because it's a rock. It's sacred because we gave it a meaning that makes it something else, something more, that reminds us of something more. So what else? What are some other ways in this coming year that some of you might work to approach the Holy Tim?
So my retort.
Oh.
The bridge is hers, that's fine, it's great, even the building, the hotel, I thought. Grandmother and whoever else was there, but mine is well, ditto to Judy, because that's just probably all the way around. But water, I can sit there and stare at the water forever and just be lost.
And look where you work.
Perfect.
He works at Lake Lanier.
You know, in my adult life, I've worked either on a lake, ocean, river.
Yeah.
So I just can't be away from the water, so call me a fish guy.
Yeah. Asha.
I think it's not just stuff in places, though, too. It can be, I like the term sacred communion. Time with my son, time with Paul, time with y'all, time with friends, you know, like, and I don't mean like the party. I mean like real time connecting with someone that you care about. I think that's one of the most holy things that we can experience. And on the flip side, you were saying the practice, what is it? You say something, gatha, you know, say something as you're looking at your plate. For me, it's more like, say nothing, you know, go look at the nature, see the deer, see whatever it is, feel. For me, it's feel the food on the table and the gratitude for that, and feel what it feels like to be making the food. And words just kind of get in the way.
Yeah. Just awareness of everything it took to bring that to your plate. What Thich Nhat Hanh calls interbeing. All the hundreds of people that work to bring it there.
I don't even think I go there. For me, it's just feeling the moment. Like, get rid of the thoughts. Just feel. No thoughts, just feel.
I've spent a lifetime searching for ways to find the divine. I've been blessed to travel all over the world, and whether it is being exposed to ayahuasca or walking a maze or a vision quest or whatever the opportunity in the place that I'm at, for me, I think is an awareness that we're all searching for whatever it is. And I think a part of me has been envious of people who have found that way to come to the divine in what I would say would be easier than the way it seems
Yeah.
that my life path has taken me. And I think sometimes we think, oh, how lucky we are. We live in these wonderful homes and we have all the food we need and everything we need. But if you're an Aboriginal, that maybe the food or the house isn't as grand, but you're walking in the divine all the time, or a Buddhist who your daily rice is all you have, but you're doing the Gatha every day and you're walking in the divine, I wonder what it means to be fortunate or successful, or the way we look at it, what's
Yeah.
important. And I think that's an awareness that comes with time, and it might start with individuals like your son or our children, but somehow we might lose it and need to come back to it. And so I'm not sure I'm providing anybody a solution, just an awareness I wanted to share.
Yeah. No, you're exactly right. Thank you for that. Actually, those are several absolutely wonderful observations. It's not some, and what it made me think was sometimes all the stuff we have keeps us away from it. Because we spend so much time working to maintain the stuff that we have, or working to maintain the face that we have. And that's part of releasing our ego, is just not worrying about that. You know, I get a big job, so I go buy a bigger house, so I spend more hours at my big job paying for my bigger house that I never have time to go live in. So, well, no, seriously, I mean, that's how it works for a lot of people. So, yeah, I mean, maybe one of our challenges this year is to learn how to live more simply, and how to live more in awareness of, you know, I kind of want to say what matters, but that sounds so trite, but you know what I mean. What really is our true self, what really does connect us to the divine. Yeah. Yeah, Adrian.
I come from the Jewish tradition. What I found over my lifetime is that I've come in connection with the sacred through various things, and then somehow I lose it. And so I would say the first time I was aware of whatever, and I don't, that's what I always call it, is whatever, because in Judaism you don't talk about God, you talk about His attributes. Anyway, so I used to ski every single, I think it was Sunday, I don't remember exactly, when I was in high school. Now I lived in California, so we're talking about real mountains, the Sierra Nevadas, okay? And some of them, when you're at the very top, it's very easy to see into Nevada. I mean, that's just, I can't explain to you how awesome that feeling is.
Yeah.
And when I felt closest to whatever was when we had some newly fallen snow. It seems like the entire world is so quiet and fresh. And the only thing you hear is crunch.
Yeah.
And I used to just, I now know that, you know, this is kind of like being mindful, but at the time I used to just listen to the crunch. So, and then, like I said, I lost it. And then the next time I felt like I touched this was, I was at synagogue, and it doesn't have to be there, of course, but, and I had my talit, the prayer shawl, wrapped around, you know, like it's over your head and it's wrapped around you, and you just kind of envelop yourself in it. And the first thing I related to was that feeling of quiet, of like shutting out that every day and being in connection with the moment. And when Jews pray, we don't just well, first of all, we stand. And second of all, we don't just stand. In other words, we're kind of swaying. I'm sure if you've seen, you know. Anyway, so we're kind of swaying. And again, I find I don't have words to explain these experiences to others. But I think it's kind of meditative, or it puts you in a meditative state. And it doesn't take long, for me anyway, to get in connection with
Right.
that whatever.
Yeah. It's interesting because some people when they do pray, thank you, Adrian, some people when they do pray, they do take those moments that what we see as transition moments to put on that shawl or to light that candle. And what you're doing is you're telling yourself this is a different moment. I'm walking through that doorway from ordinary time to sacred time, and this is how I do it. So things like that are wonderfully useful. The other thing that I reflect on as I listen to this is that in order to find the sacred, sometimes it helps to not know what it is we're going to see. You know, Mother Teresa said our biggest obstacle to finding God is what we saw when we saw God before. Because then that's what we think we're going to find. But I think we're invited to keep an open mind, to keep a curiosity, to keep no expectation about what the holy is going to look like. And just like when Judy said she just saw Nick, it's like wham, there she was. You know, it's not like you were looking for a particular showing of God and so you were not open to that one. I think the invitation is just to be open, to see the holy in so many aspects of our lives. So I think we need to wrap up. What?
One more.
Oh, yes.
Okay, yeah, no, I was just.
They put a clock there for me to look at. Okay.
Well, what I got out of that was that God is in the crunch. That was awesome. So, I'll keep it short. So what mesmerizes me is the moon, actually, and it creates a unity for me, for my family, because when I would be separated from my children, they go with their dad after the divorce, I would always tell them, just take a look at the moon, because I see the same moon you're looking at, and my message is there, and just know that I love you. And so as they grew older, and everywhere, like if we were ever separated, it was always that connection of knowing that my message was there, and it just, I'm always in awe of looking at the moon.
Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah, that was your way of communicating. And that's your way of grounding them, of having shared experiences even though you weren't together. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you. So as we move on this year, let's keep coming back to this topic, because that's what we're doing, is we're trying to find ways to connect with the holy in our lives, individually and also in community. But thank you. I've enjoyed this. Thanks a lot. So as our band gets set.